Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here. This is going to be my patch 10.0.7, hopefully quick, Destruction Warlock DPS guide / refresher video. Now, unlike Affliction and Demonology, Destruction really hasn't gotten a whole lot of changes in patch 10.0.7, outside of a couple class tree damage buffs, or I guess new talent nodes, which do indeed increase our damage a little bit, but for the most part, there have been some changes to builds and single target and AOE. Rotations are pretty similar, but a few changes here and there. So I want to make a quick refresher video covering all that, and I guess just go from there. So any weak course add-ons or profiles you see in the video, links to my Twitch and Discord down below are over free for you guys. And as always, I want to give one huge shout out to my patrons where you get too far in the video. Guys, I appreciate all support on Patreon. A million times. Thank you. If you're looking to supporting on Patreon, should be a link up here as well as down below. It's worth mentioning that the 10.1 PTR Warlock spreadsheet will indeed be going live in probably about a week and a half, 2 weeks, depending on what testing looks like. The tier 3 Felguard rank or higher of Patreon does indeed get early access to that if you're interested. And like I said, links down below. With that being said, let's just get into it, starting off with talent builds. So getting in the talent trees here, I think it's important to start off with the class tree, highlight the important nodes, and then talk about some of the floater traits you have in the end for utility or whatever you want. So when it comes to Warlock class trees, we have a couple new DPS nodes in the tree in both Sarkathar's Guile and Sargerai Technique in 10.0.7, which basically are required 2 out of 2 traits for the majority of the specs, but let's just jump right into it. So typically it starts off 1 point in Burning Rush, 1 point in Fell Domination, 2 points in Demon Skin, 2 points in Fell Armor for more defensiveness, 1 point in either Coil or Howl of Terror. Coil is a good self-heal, Howl of Terror is a good AoE, in-cap, all that kind of stuff. I guess Fear, whatever you want to call it, but typically it's Coil for self-healing, 1 point in Curses of Enfeeblement, 1 point in Demonic Embrace for more stamina, 1 point in Demonic Inspiration. This is a DPS increase. It increases the attack speed of your pet by 5%, and if you sack your pet with Sacrifice for Destro, it gives you a 15% increase to Sack's damage. Now, on top of that, we also have Wrathful Minion, which also increases pet damage in a sense. This is a raw damage increase comparatively to a speed, or I guess attack speed increase, but it also has the Grimoire of Sacrifice clause attached to it, so we grab that as well. Then 1 point here in Demonic Fortitude. In past here, mostly I typically end up going into Demonic Gateway, which is used in the majority of settings, which unlocks both Shadow Fury and this choice node here. Then 1 point typically in Sweet Souls, which unlocks Dark Pact, which is your shorter defensive based cooldown. So you grab Dark Pact, you grab typically Shadow Fury. I'm going to skip it for now, but typically you do. So we'll grab Dark Pact, we'll grab either Strength of Will or Dark Accord if you want a shorter cooldown or if you want a larger defensive shield. Going over here into Frequent Donor, giving you a 45-second cooldown on Dark Pact, which is very strong. Then you have your 4 point nodes here. So you have 3 points left to spend to unlock the bottom rows here. 2 points in Sarkathar's Guile, which is a 20% immolate damage increase, 10 at rank 1 and 20 at rank 2. 2 points in Sargerai Technique, which is an Incinerate increase at 5% and 10%. And you have access to the final row here. Now, you'll want to grab Soul Link, which is a damage sort of split kind of thing. It also has a clause on if you sack your pet, you get more stamina. And you grab that. 2 points in Synergy, which is a DPS increase. Basically, if your pet does damage, there's a chance to proc Synergy on you, which increases your damage, and it works vice versa. You have a chance to proc on your pet as well. Solid increase. 2 points here in Soul Conduit, giving you a chance to refund the shard whenever you spend one, which is good for a lot of Destro play. And then 1 point here in Inquisitor's Gaze and Summon Soulkeeper. Now, in single target, raid encounters where you don't need heavy AoE, Inquisitor's Gaze is typically always the choice here. Soulkeeper has been buffed a good bit in 0.7 and is likely going to be the play in AoE and Mythic Plus. We'll see where that goes, but default, I'm going to take Inquisitor's Gaze here. So you have 4 points left. At this point, typically, I opt for Soulburn. It gives a lot of utility in various settings, circles, gateways, drain lives, health funnel, hellstones, all that. And you have 3 points left here. Now, you can put points in things like Lifeblood, in things like Profane Bargain, Resolute Barrier, Fell Synergy for more defensiveness. You can put it in this if you want for whatever reason. It's not very good. Or you can put it in Shadow Fury for a stun, which is typically useful in the majority of settings, certainly Mythic Plus and things. And then if you want, you can put 2 points. You put a point in Dark Fury to give a shorter cooldown on Shadow Fury and increase the radius. You can put a point here for defensiveness. A lot of players choose to put 2 points in Fiendish Stride, which reduces the damage Burning Rush does to you by 25 and 50, and it makes you run even faster. It basically means you can leave Burning Rush on for the majority of content, not permanently, but it's up to you. And there are a lot of other choices here too. If you want a CC that is new in this patch, you have Nightmare. When fear ends, that's the wrong one. Sorry, Horrify. It causes your target to basically cower in place instead of running around when you fear a mob. Very cool, gives Lock a CC. There's Banish here, Amplify Curse, a lot of customizations for Warlock. Realistically, this is never taken, only for Affliction, and there's that, but you can pick and choose, but I'd say the skeleton of Warlock trees typically looks something like this. You have 4-ish points to play with. I'd opt for Soulburn, Shadow Fury, and 2 points of Fiendish Stride the majority of the time. So when it comes to Destro's spec tree in those builds, single target, cleave, and AoE, there really isn't a whole lot that's changed from 10.0 going into patch 10.0.7 talent-wise. This is going to be your typical single target build. You're playing Chaos Bolts, you're playing Reverse Entropy, Conflict Rate, obviously, Backdraft, Explosive Potential, Roaring Blaze, putting a point in Soulfire, and putting a point in Decimation. Then you're grabbing 2 points here, Flashpoint via a 1 point in Backlash, 2 points in Scalding Flames, 1 point in Grimoire Sacrifice, 2 points in Ashen Remains, 2 points in Eradication, 1 in Infernal, 1 in Diabolic Embers, 2 in Madness of the Azakir, 1 in Chaos Incarnate, which gives you a maximum master benefit on your Chaos Bolts, and Rain of Fires, and Shadowburns. Then over here, you grab Ritual of Ruin, you grab 2 points in Burn to Ashes, and this is your big Incinerate damage amp in your class or spec tree here. 1 point in Avatar Destruction. You have 1 point here in Master Ritualist. Now, for those that are new to Destro Lock, this here is basically your 2-piece and 4-piece from Sepulchre, the first ones, the big purple Infernals every 10 or 15 Chaos Bolt cast. This is basically that. Now, Burn to Ashes is the one thing, as far as I remember, that's changed in the spec tree going into 0.7, and it now stacks up to 6 times. While this does sound better than stacking up to 4 times, realistically, you're casting Chaos Bolt so often due to Madness and the short window that it has. Madness is 5 seconds, by the way, not 4. The tooltip is wrong. It is 5 seconds. They never changed it when they buffed it in beta. It is 5 seconds. You're casting so many Chaos Bolts due to Madness's nature, and each Chaos Bolt grants 2 stacks of Burn to Ashes. You really never drop below 1 stack of Burn to Ashes, even when you had a limit of 4 stacks of BTA, or Burn to Ashes. So adding 2 more stacks onto it in 0.7 really doesn't help much. There are some very, very niche points in time where you might end up casting 3 or 4 Incinerates in a row if you don't get any kind of, 2-piece, 4-piece value, if your Infernal's not down, if you have no shards and no Soul Conduit refunds. But realistically, you never drop below 1 stack of Burn to Ashes, so this change doesn't really change much. But this is going to be your de facto, for the most part, single target build. Now, if you don't like Soulfire, you can put a point in Shadowborn and a point in Conflagration of Chaos. It does seem a bit less, but not by a crazy amount, and you don't have to hit Soulfire. Moving on, we have our Cleave build. 2 targets, whether it's spread or stack Cleave. This is it, and watch what changes here. You just take 2 points, 1 out of Soulfire, 1 out of Decimation, and you put 2 points in Rolling Havoc. And now I will admit, or I will say there's times where I have indeed played Mayhem, like on Kurog Grim Totem in Vault of the Incarnates, due to the nature of Mayhem and having a bit more funnel damage on the high end. But the vast majority of the time, you end up playing Havoc and Pandemonium for a longer Havoc window. The only change here is Rolling Havoc. Every time you duplicate a spell, you gain 2% increased damage, stacking up to 5 times for 10% for 6 seconds. And whenever you cast a spell that's duplicated by Havoc, it refreshes that buff or gives you another stack, up to 5. It's a big bonus in 2+ target cleave when you're Havocing. It can mean more funnel damage. Besides that, it's pretty much the exact same build. 2-piece, 4-piece from Sepulchre, Burn to Ashes, 2 points in Madness, 2 points in Chaos Incarnate, 1 point in Chaos Incarnate, a point in Diabolic Embers, and a point in Summon Infernal. Now, when you're looking at playing Mythic, or like Destro, Mythic Plus, and heavy AoE settings, this is typically the build you play. Those 2 previous builds are not playing Rain of Fire. This build, however, is. This build opts for Rain of Fire, Pyrogenics, and Inferno, opting to not go 2 points in Scalding Flames and 1 point in Sacrifice. So you have 3 points less here, and you have 1, 2, 3 being spent here. This is the build you see in the MDI, in these high-end settings where they're pulling 9, 10, 12, 14 mobs, plus these huge pulls where a lock puts their Infernal down and just decimates everything. A million Rain of Fires hits a million plus DPS, and then, you can do it again every 3 minutes with your Infernal again. And Infernal fuels that. Because Rain of Fire, it increases damage for Rain of Fire, and each Rain of Fire has a 1 in 5 chance to generate a Soul Shard fragment. When you have multiple Rain of Fires rolling, they do stack, and they're hitting multiple targets. That's how you see Warlock, like Destro Lock shards just filling back up so quickly every time, whether it's Inferno value or Havocing and casting Conflict Rates or Immolate ticks. This is what fuels the big AoE build, Inferno and your 2-piece, 4-piece here. You are opting for no points in Burn to Ashes instead in this build. You're putting 2 points in Master Ritualist, giving you the full reduction. Basically, purple Infernals as fast as humanly possible, compared to having 1 point here in other builds. And you have 1 point here in Power Overwhelming, which gives you a mastery benefit whenever you cast shard-consuming spells. That's actually pretty good, because you're playing Chaos Incarnate, which gives you max mastery benefit to Chaos Bolt, Rain of Fire, and Shadow Burn. And you can see how this build is very synergistic. So this is the only build that plays Rain of Fire. Once again, builds will change from time to time depending on what fight you're doing. I would encourage you to check the spreadsheet as well as the website. Links to both down below if you want the most up-to-date builds. I'll try and keep it up to date if things change, but the link to these 3 builds would also be down below. So when it comes to Destro's single target rotation, the important thing to remember here is Madness of the Azakir. Madness of the Azakir's duration is 5 seconds once again, not 4, but you have to... So Chaos Bolt checks for the damage increase in the first part of this talent upon cast resolution. So you have to essentially finish the second Chaos Bolt cast before the buff falls from the previous Chaos Bolt. Now, outside of that, you maintain Immolates, cast Conflict Rates, and try and weave in Incinerates via Burn to Ashes whenever you can. Now, I have a weak right here that shows procs and things. You'll see the Burn to Ashes icon pop up. It's not going to go away. We're going to overcap all the time. That's just the nature of destruction. It's not... I mean, it doesn't feel optimal, but there's not much you can really do about it. So we are indeed playing Soulfire here. If you're not playing Soulfire, it's fine. Just don't cast Soulfire in your opener. Cast Immolate instead. But we're going to cast Soulfire because we are playing it. So we've sacked our pet. We're going in the opener. Pre-cast Soulfire. I'm going to Conflict Rate. Put my Infernal down. Again, casting Chaos Bolts. So Bolt. There's Madness there. There's Burn to Ashes. Bolt. I'm going to Conflict Rate. Bolt again. Watching Madness window here. Incinerating, Conflict Rating, Bolting. And here's our Burn to Ashes stacks too. We're already capped at 6. We're overcapping here. Apply Immolate. Incinerate. I'm going to Conflict Rate. This is going to fall, so I'm going to Incinerate again. Cast Bolt. Incinerate. Bolt. Incinerate. Bolt. Incinerate. Bolt. And you pretty much get it. This is the gist of Destro. You want to weave your Chaos Bolts where you're maintaining Madness, but trying to weave Incinerates in between them if possible. The dump Burn to Ashes stacks. Well, casting Conflict Rates and basically casting Soulfire on cooldown as well. Now, if you're playing Decimation, the talent here, Soulfire will indeed come off cooldown faster when your target's below half health, so it's important to watch that. For the most part, when you're in that range, Soulfire can typically just reapply Immolate passively on its own because it applies it whenever you cast Soulfire, but that's the gist of it. The important thing about Destro, it is not mobile at all. So realistically, all you're really doing is weaving Chaos Bolts, weaving Incinerates, casting Conflict Rates, maintaining Immolate, and the big thing, make sure to not let the Madness of the Azakir buff fall if you're trying to cast Chaos Bolt. It'll fall from time to time when your shard generation drops off and you don't have Infernal down, you're not getting good Soul Conduit refunds. If that's the case, cast a handful of Incinerates and go back into the Madness dump windows. But you don't want to be in a spot of, you know, being at 3 shards, cast Chaos Bolt, okay, I have no shards, I'm trying to build to it, building to it, building to it, then bolting again. When the buff falls, right? You want to build the 3.5 or 4, bolt, Conflict Rate, ensure the second bolt, bolt again, then reassess from there. And that's the gist of Destro single target. So when it comes to Havoc Cleave based settings, there's really 2 ways to use Havoc. One is to generate shards to typically fuel more Rain of Fire casts, which we'll cover in the AoE section here. But if you're in a 2-target setting where you want to actually cleave Chaos Bolts and things, this is the general rotation you want to follow with Havoc. And it's very similar to the rotation we did in single target. So let's say we're hitting these 2 dummies right here. I'm going to pop my Infernal, but you might not have it. It's A-okay. It's still basically the same thing. So we're going to pre-apply some Immolates here. Immolate, Immolate, put my Infernal down, put a Havoc up over here. I'll Conflict Rate, and just begin bolting. Bolt. Bolt, we're going to Conflict Rate, we're going to bolt, keeping in mind, once again, Madness. Still playing around Madness, reapply Immolate, bolt, bolt, trying to dump Incinerates for Burn to Ashes. Havoc has fallen, so we'll keep burning 1 target here. Still playing around Madness. If this is a permanent setting, you're waiting for Havoc to come back up again. So let's say we have Havoc in roughly 6 seconds here. I'll bolt again. I'll probably bolt twice here, dump some shards, so we get getting some refunds. I'll reapply Immolate, go Havoc, and begin dumping once again. Bolt, Conflagrate, bolt, Conflagrate, bolt. I could leave some Incinerates in here too, depending on shard gen. We got a proc, it's a fast Chaos Bolt, bolt, Conflagrate, and one more bolt for the road if I can finish it, and there we go. Havoc is very simple to play with. It might seem complicated, but realistically, it's not. You maintain your Immolates, typically applying beforehand, but if you have to apply through Havoc, it's okay. You still apply the Madness emphasis of finishing Chaos Bolt cast with the previous buff up, weaving Incinerates if possible, and just going from there. It's not too complicated. Let's talk about AoE and Havoc's other use, building shards for Rain of Fire casts. Now, when it comes to Destruction's AoE rotation, playing this build here, Inferno, Rain of Fire, Pyrogenics, all that stuff, 2 points of Master Ritualist, your heavy Mythic Plus AoE build, you typically just want to cast multiple Rain of Fires in heavy AoE. So your opener typically looks something like this. You'll want to end up precasting a few Immolates when the tank runs in, for example. Your Havoc here is going to be used to actually build shards. You're not typically casting Chaos Bolts unless you have 2 targets in this scenario. You're going to go into Havoc and typically cast Conflagrates or Incinerates if need be to generate shards, and then use those shards to fuel more Rain of Fire casts. So let's say the tank's running in, grabbing the pack. I'll put up a few Immolates here. So we'll go 1, 2, 3. You'll typically have Flashpoint, but I don't. So we'll put our Infernal down, cast a Rain of Fire, then put up a Havoc. I'll Conflagrate. Rain of Fire. I should have an Immolate on this target, it's fine. But typically using Conflagrates, using Incinerates to build resources here. There's an Infernal proc, Rain of Fire, Rain of Fire, Rain of Fire, Conflagrates, Rain of Fire, Incinerates, Rain of Fire, Rain of Fire, Rain of Fire. You can see the partial shard gen coming in here, partially from Infernals, partially from Avatar Destruction procs, partially from multiple Rain of Fire casts, all that going on, right? Now, this is only 5 targets. When you make that 10 targets, 12 targets, 14 targets, you can see how crazy it can get. We go back into our Havoc window again here, cast multiple Conflagrates again, Incinerates again, building shards here, refresh Immolate if need be, cast a Rain of Fire, Conflagrate, Rain of Fire, Rain of Fire, a proc once again, cast an Incinerate. You can see how crazy this gets in these 10, 12 plus target settings, and how wild it can be in settings like the MDI, in things like Alcathar's Academy, these heavy, just dense mob-based dungeons where you can pull 3-4 packs, and instead of hitting 5 targets with Rain of Fire and Inferno, you're hitting 10, 12, 14, and getting just insane shard value back. So important things to note here. Once again, make sure to roll a few Immolates going into the pack so you can get Flashpoint value. You're using your Havoc. Instead of casting Chaos Bolts, you're not casting Chaos Bolts. You're using Havoc to actually generate shards via Conflagrate, cast more Rain of Fires, via Incinerate, and obviously, you know, you'll get multiple procs from Ritual of Ruin, Avatar Destruction, for even more shard gen during your Rain of Fire windows. Alright, so as far as gems, consumables, enchants, and stat priorities go, for Warlock, your general stat priority is going to be Haste, then Mastery is basically equal to Crit being number 3, and then Versatility. Now, obviously, you want Intellect as your main stat is going to be the strongest stat overall, which typically is why eye level usually reigns supreme unless they're pretty close eye level wise. I will say, as a general blanket statement, you're going to want to run your own sims on raidbots.com using a top gear sim with gems and enchants taken into account to find the most DPS for your character, because your character's gear will certainly vary from my character's gear, and vice versa. I might want more mastery, I might have more haste, I might have more crit, which will sway secondary stats one way or the other from what your character is wearing. If you want to follow the general statement of haste, mastery, crit, and verse, go for it, but you might be leaving some DPS on the table. Now, as far as enchants are concerned, it doesn't really vary a whole lot. Going through here, they're all rank 3, obviously. Typically, rank 3 is pretty cheap. Under a cloak, you're going to end up having avoidance, graceful avoidance. On chest, waking stats, it is an intellect enchant, 200 avoidance on bracers. When it comes to legs, it is called Frozen Spell Thread, 177 int and 105 stamina. It shouldn't be too expensive. Your boots are going to be Plains Runner's Breeze at rank 3, and your rings are going to be either Devotion of Haste or Devotion of Mastery. The majority of players play Devotion of Haste. I have seen Devotion of Mastery be a little higher for Affliction. Personally, I prefer Haste for all of them. It sims the highest for me, and that's where you want to run your own sims. If you don't want to run them, just play Haste. It's typically very close regardless. And on your weapon, you want Sophic Devotion 3. 3 can be a little expensive. It's worth it if you have the gold, but if not, Sophic 2 or Sophic 1 should be pretty cheap for you. Now, as far as gems are concerned, for the most part, the majority of Warlocks end up just playing gems like this, which are going to be 70 haste and 33 mastery. I have seen pure haste gems sometimes as well. I have actually one Sims higher for me. It's called Quickest Emerald. So it is either Quickest Emerald being pure haste or Keenest Emerald being the major haste minor mastery gem. Keep in mind, you do indeed want one of these limited diamonds, which is a BOP gem that Jewelcraft has to make for you. 75 primary stat, being intellect, and 66 haste. That's the gist of enchants and gems. As far as consumables go, you're going to want Howling Runes. It's basically the weapon oils of Dragonflight. Faded Fortune Cookies are your best options for food. They are a little pricey, but they last an hour, and it's baseline intellect. If you have the actual food embellishment here, being, I think it's called Alchemical Flavor Packet, it basically is a permanent 2-hour buff. It's pretty solid, saves you a lot of money. Phial of Elemental Chaos and Phial of Tepid Versatility. These both sim very close for me. I think it favors this by 30 or 40 DPS, which is very, 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 very small. I will say that versatility, if you are in a progression setting or a setting where you're taking a lot of damage, this will both give you a DPS increase as well as damage taken reduction because it's versatility. So it's up to you. I typically just drink versatility files at this point for, you know, the damage increase and the damage taken reduction. But in the end, they're both very, very close. And as far as augment runes are concerned, you have Draconic augment runes. There's that. The two embellishments I'm wearing are going to be Elemental Lariat, obviously, and Emis of the Blue. Now, you can indeed get the potion embellishment if you want from Mythic Plus. Emis is still better in single target and raiding the majority of the time, but I have seen some players playing things like potion embellishment or a couple other ones here and there in Mythic Plus. So thanks for watching, guys. That should just about wrap it up. Hopefully the video answered all the questions you might have had about Destro going into patch 10.0.7. Like I said, not a whole lot's really changed compared to Demo and AF, but you know, it sort of is what it is. Destro's still a pretty good spec when it comes to single target sims. In sustained heavy AoE, it's not bad at all either. It's pretty good. And even in 2-target cleave, it's pretty solid. So we'll see where it goes, and maybe some more changes coming in 10.1. Like I mentioned, any weekly warehouse add-ons and profiles, links down below my Twitch and Discord, where they're all for free for you guys. And as always, I want to give one huge shout out to my patrons before the video ends. Guys, thank you a million times for all support on Patreon. I really appreciate it. If you're looking at supporting on Patreon, should be a link up here as well as down below. And I do want to mention once again that the 10.1 PTR Warlock spreadsheet will indeed be going live in about a week and a half or 2 weeks, depending on testing and things. The tier 3 Felguard rank or higher, a Patreon does indeed get early access to that if you're interested. And yeah, so like I said, not a whole lot changing with Warlock in 0.7, but I'm hoping that I guess Destro lock, but I'm hoping that the minor changes that came to Destro in 0.7 have set a good foundation for what could be larger changes in 0.1. Even though this is a 0.7 guide, let's be honest, everyone's looking towards 10.1 and the new raid, Aberrus and all that. So I will say, once again, Vault wasn't a very good raid either for Destro Lock. I feel like it was very undertuned at the start, and even with it being buffed a lot, it just feels like it's sort of, but most of the fights aren't very good Destro fights. So we'll see where all that goes. But with that being said, thanks for watching, guys. If you liked the video, hit the like and sub buttons below. It helps out a ton. And I will catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.